But Hesiod said that first of all there was chaos, and then broad earth was made to be the receptacle of everything else. For it is evident that the receptacle and place are principles, as is stated in physics. And he also held that love, which instructs all the immortals, is a principle of things. He did this because the communication of goodness seems to spring from love, for a good deed is a sign and effect of love. Hence, since corruptible things derive their being and every good disposition from immortal beings of this kind, this must be attributed to the love of the immortals. Furthermore, he held that the immortals are either the celestial bodies themselves or material principles themselves. Thus he posited chaos and love as though there had to be in existing things not only a material cause of their motions, but also an efficient cause which moves and unites them, which seems to be the office of love. For love moves us to action because it is the source of all the emotions, since fear, sadness, and hope proceed only from love. That love unites things is clear from this. Love itself is a certain union between the lover and the thing loved, seeing that the lover regards the beloved as himself. This man Hesiod is to be numbered among the poets who lived before the time of the philosophers. Now as to which one of these thinkers is prior, that is, more competent in knowledge, whether the one who said that love is the first principle or the one who said that intellect is, can be decided later on, that is, where God is discussed. He calls this decision an arrangement because the degree of excellence belonging to each man is allotted to him in this way. Another translation states this more clearly. Therefore, in what order it is fitting to go over these thinkers, and who in this order is prior, can be decided later on. Lecture 6, Love and Hate as Causes. But since there would seem to be in nature things that are contrary to those that are good, and not only order and good, but also disorder and what is base, and evil things more numerous than good ones, and base things more numerous than noble ones, for this reason, another thinker introduced love and strife as causes, each of its own type of effects. For if anyone grasps what Empedocles said, taking it according to its meaning rather than according to its faltering expression, he will find that love is the cause of things that come to be by aggregation, and strife the cause of evil things. Hence, if anyone were to say that Empedocles in a sense both said and was the first to say that good and evil are principles, he would perhaps speak correctly. That is, if the cause of all good things is good, and that of all evil things is evil. These thinkers then, as we have said, to this extent have touched on two of the causes which we established in the physics, matter and the source of motion, though only obscurely and with no clarity, much as untrained men conduct themselves in battle. For the latter, though encircled, often deal telling blows, but without science. In the same way, these thinkers do not seem to be aware of what they are saying, for it seems that they almost never make use of the causes except to a small degree. Anaxagoras uses intellect in an artificial way in generating the world, for when he is in difficulty as to what is necessarily the cause of something, he drags in this intellect. But in other cases, he makes everything but intellect the cause of what comes to be. Empedocles is the true maker. Empedocles, it is true, makes greater use of causes than Anaxagoras, though not sufficiently. Nor does one find in his use of them what he professed. In many places he argues that love separates things, and that strife brings them together. For when being itself is separated into its elements by strife, then fire and each of the other elements are brought together into a unity. But when they are united by love, the particles must again be separated out from each element. In contrast to the first philosophers, then, Empedocles was the first to introduce this cause, dividing it in such a way as to make the source of motion not a single principle, but different and contrary ones. Moreover, he was the first to claim that the elements which are said to belong to the species of matter are four in number, although he does not use them as four, but as two, taking fire by itself alone, and its opposites, earth, air, and water, as a single nature. But anyone may see this by studying his basic sayings. This philosopher, then, as we have said, has spoken in this way about the principles of things and their number. Here Aristotle gives the opinion of those who posited contrariety in beings of this kind, and the reason which moved them, which is as follows. There would seem to be in nature things that are contrary to those that are good, because in nature one finds not only things that are ordered and good, but sometimes things that are disordered and base. Now it cannot be said that evil things have no cause but happen by chance, because evil things are more numerous than good ones, and base things more numerous than those which are unqualifiedly noble. But those things that come to be by chance without a definite cause do not occur for the most part, but in the smaller number of cases. Hence, since contrary effects have contrary causes, it was necessary to hold a cause of things not only love, but from which the order and good in things originate, but also hate, which is the source of disorder and baseness or evil in things, so that in this way particular instances of evil and good have their own type of causes. That this was the reason which moved Empedocles is evident if anyone grasps what he says, taking his statement according to its meaning, rather than according to the words which he used imperfectly and as though he were stammering. For he said that it is the office of love to bring the elements together, and of hate to separate them, but since the generation of things is a result of the coming together of the elements, by reason of which there is being and good in things, and their corruption a result of the separation of the elements, which is the way to not being and evil, it is now evident that he wanted love to be the cause of things that come to be by aggregation, that is, of good things, and hate the cause of evil things. Thus, if one were to say that Empedocles was the first to maintain that good and evil are principles, he would perhaps speak correctly. That is to say, this would follow if Empedocles did hold that good is the cause of all good things, and evil the cause of all evil things, for it is evident that he posited evil is the cause of some evil things, namely of corruption, and good is the cause of some good things, namely of generation. But because it would not follow that all good things would be caused by friendship, or all evil things by hate, since the parts of the world would be differentiated by hate and fused together by friendship, therefore he did not always hold that good is the cause of good things, and evil the cause of evil things. These thinkers. Here he shows that in giving these causes, the philosophers treated them inadequately. First, he mentions them in a general way. Second, he treats each one individually at Anaxagoras. He says first, then, that these philosophers, Anaxagoras and Empedocles, arrived at a doctrine of two of the causes which have been established in the physics, namely matter and the cause of motion. Although they treat these obscurely and with no clarity, because they did not explain that those principles which they held to be the causes of things could be reduced to these genera of causes. But in so far as they posited two of these causes, they may be likened to untrained warriors, who, though encircled by the enemy, sometimes strike good blows, not by art, but by chance. This is evident because even though they happen to do this sometimes, this does not occur always, or for the most part. In like manner, too, these philosophers were not accustomed to express themselves accurately, nor was it their custom to speak knowingly, that is, as men who know. Hence another translation has, but these men neither have science, nor are they to be compared with men who realize what they are saying. This is shown by the fact that, although they had proposed these causes, they hardly ever used them, because they employed them in few instances. Hence it seems that they introduced them not as a result of art, but by accident, because they were moved to do so by necessity. Anaxagoras. Here he shows in what particular respect the view of each is unsatisfactory. Here first he speaks of Anaxagoras, second of Empedocles at Empedocles. He says first, then, that Anaxagoras uses intellect to generate the world, and in so doing he seems to speak of it in an artificial way, for when he inquires about the causes of the world's generation, he drags it in of necessity, that is, he invents this intelligence only because he is unable to attribute the generation of the world to any other cause which would differentiate things except to one which is essentially distinct and unmixed, and intellect is a thing of this kind. But in all other cases he draws his causes from any other source rather than intellect, as in the case of the particular natures of things. Empedocles. Here he shows in what respect Empedocles' doctrine is inadequate, and in regard to this he does two things. First, he shows in what respect Empedocles' doctrine is inadequate. Second, he explains what Empedocles himself held in contrast to the other philosophers at in contrast. He says first that Empedocles, in dealing with the particular natures of things, makes greater use of causes posited by him, the four elements and love and hate, than Anaxagoras did, because he reduced the generation and corruption of particular things to these causes, and not to intelligence as Anaxagoras did. But Empedocles failed in two ways. First, he failed because he does not treat causes of this kind adequately enough. For he uses things that are not self-evident as though they were self-evident axioms, as is stated in the physics, insofar as he assumed that they are self-evident because at one definite time strife has dominion over the elements, and at another does love. Second, he failed because in the matters which he investigates one does not find what he has professed, that is, what he held as a principle, namely that love combines things and that strife separates them, because in many places love must be on the contrary separate or divide things, and strife bring them together or unite them. For when the universe itself is separated out or divided into itself by hate, as occurs when the world is generated, all particles of fire are then combined into one whole, and so also are the individual particles of the other elements brought together or joined to each other. Hence, strife not only separates the particles of fire from those of air, but also brings together the particles of fire. But on the other hand, when the elements come together through love, which occurs when the universe is destroyed, the particles of fire must then be separated from each other, and so also must the particles of the other elements. For fire can be mixed with air only if the particles of fire are separated from each other, and the same is true of the particles of air only if these elements penetrate one another, so that love not only unites unlike things, but also separates like things, according to what follows from his position. In contrast, here he shows in what respect Empedocles' own doctrine differs from that of the other philosophers. He says that Empedocles maintains two things in contrast to the others. First, he divided the cause, which is the source of motion, into two contrary parts. Second, he held the material cause to be constituted of four elements, not that he uses the four elements as four, but rather as two, because he contrasts fire with the other three, saying that fire is active in nature and the others passive in nature. Anyone can gather this from the elements of things treated of by him, or from his basic sayings, in the sense of the rudiments of the doctrine which he propounded. Another version reads from his verses, because he is said to have written his philosophy in meters. And still another version which says from his statements agrees with this, as has been stated. Then this philosopher was the first to stipulate in this way that the principles of things are four in number, and to speak of those which have been mentioned. Lecture 7, Atomists and Pythagoreans' Opinions. Leucippus and his colleague Democritus say that the elements of things are the full and the void, calling the one being and the other non-being. For this reason, they say that the full or solid is being, and the void is non-being. For this reason, they say that being no more is than non-being, because the void no more is than body, and they hold that these are the material causes of things. And just as those who make the underlying substance one generate other things from this by means of its attributes, holding that rarity and density are the principles of these attributes, in the same way these men say that the differences of the atoms are the causes of different things. These differences, they say, are three: shape, arrangement, and position. For they claim that what exists differs only by rhythm, intercontact, and turning. Of these, rhythm means shape, intercontact, arrangement, and turning position. For A differs from N in shape, and C from N in position. But with regard to motion, from whence it comes or how it is present in things, these men carelessly dismissed this question, as the other thinkers did, as we have said before. Then, these two types of causes seem to have been investigated to this extent by the first thinkers, but during the time of these and prior to them lived those called the Pythagoreans, who dealt with mathematics and were the first to develop it. Having been regarded in mathematics, they thought that their principles were the principles of all things. But since among these principles numbers are naturally first, they thought they saw in numbers more than in fire and earth many resemblances to things that are and come to be, because this attribute of numbers is justice. Another is soul and mind, and still another is time, and similarly, so to speak, with each thing. Moreover, since they considered the attributes and ratios of harmonies in terms of numbers, and since other things in their whole nature seem to be likened to numbers, and since numbers are the first things in the whole of nature, they thought that the elements of numbers are the elements of all things, and that the whole heaven is a harmony in number, and whatever they had revealed in the case of numbers and harmonies, which they could show to be an arrangement with the motions and parts of the heavens, and its whole arrangement, they collected and adapted to these. And if anything was lacking anywhere, they called it in order that their undertaking might be complete. I mean that since the number 10 seems to be the perfect number and to comprise the whole nature of numbers, they said that the bodies which move in the heavens are 10 in number, but as only 9 are observable, they therefore invented a 10th, the counter earth. These things have been dealt with more exactly in another work. Here he begins to give the positions of those who held strange and obscure views about the principles of things. First, he gives the position of those who held that there are many principles of things, and second, the position of those who held that there is only one being but there are some. In regard to the first, he does two things. First, he gives the opinion of Leucippus and Democritus, who held that the principle of things are bodily. Second, he gives the opinion of the Pythagoreans, who held that the principles of things are incorporeal entities but during the time. In regard to the first, he does two things. First, he gives the opinion of Democritus and Leucippus about the material cause of things, and second, their opinion about the cause of diversity, that is, how matter is differentiated into many things. In this discussion, the cause of the generation and corruption of things also becomes evident. This is a point on which these men agreed with the ancient philosophers and just as those who. He says then that two philosophers, Democritus and Leucippus, who are called friends because they followed each other in all things, held that the principles of things are the full and the void or empty, of which the full is being and the void or empty is non-being. Now, in order to clarify this opinion, we must recall what the philosopher says in On Generation and Corruption, where he treats it more fully. For certain philosophers had held that everything is one continuous immobile being, because it seems that there cannot be motion without a void, or any distinction between things, as they said, and though they could not comprehend the privation of continuity, by reason of which bodies must be understood to be differentiated except by means of a void, they claimed that the void existed in no way. Democritus, who came after them, and who agreed with their reasoning, but was unable to exclude diversity and motion from things, held that the void existed, and that all bodies are composed of certain indivisible bodies. He did this because it seemed to him that no reason could be given why the whole of being should be divided in one part rather than another, and lest he should hold that the whole of being is continuous, he therefore chose to maintain that this whole is divided everywhere and in its eternity. This could not be the case if anything divisible remained undivided. And according to him, indivisible bodies of this kind can neither exist nor be joined together except by means of the void. For if the void did not come between any two of them, one continuous whole would result from the two, which he did not hold from for the above reason. Hence he said that the continuous quantity of each body is constituted both of those indivisible bodies filling indivisible spaces and of certain empty spaces, which he called pores, coming between these indivisible bodies. And since the void is non-being and the full is being, it is evident from this that he did not hold that a thing was constituted by being rather than non-being, because the bodies did not constitute things more than the void, or the void more than bodies, but he said that a body is composed at once of these two things, as is clear in the text. Hence he held that these two things are the causes of things as their matter, and just as those, here he shows In what respect these philosophers agreed with the ancients who claimed that there is only one matter. He indicates agreement in two respects. First, just as the ancient philosophers held that there is one matter, and from that one matter generated something else according to the different attributes of matter, namely the rare and dense, which they accepted as the principles of all other attributes. In a similar way, Democritus and Leucippus said that there were different causes of different things, namely of the bodies composed of these indivisible bodies, that is, the different beings were produced as a result of certain differences of these indivisible bodies and their pores.